Welcome back to the DUNJUNGUY Dev Diary. This time, I'm talking about the Beast Elemental, a boss fight that will take place in the caves environment, coming very soon. Bringing it to life starts from a concept sheet I used to pitch a character design to the team. Once it's approved, I begin animating a rough sketch of the basic motions. The use of the onion skin feature is absolutely essential. I usually draw the most extreme poses of each motion first, and then smooth it out by adding intermediate or in-between frames. This is called animating pose to pose. Sometimes I'll do straight ahead animation instead, where I draw each frame in order. However, I personally tend to struggle to produce the same energy and strength in my motions when using a straight ahead approach. This particular design calls for an idle loop, walk cycles and basic attacks in 4 directions, as well as 2 special attacks. I proceed like this until I'm satisfied with how the motions are functioning. Here are some of the things I tend to think about while doing character animations for DUNJUNGUY. As DUNJUNGUY is an action game, players should be able to react to enemy attacks. Getting hit without warning feels unsatisfying and discourages players to get good, as it unnecessarily lowers the skill ceiling of the game. Enemy animations ideally have 3 phases: a clearly telegraphed windup, followed by the primary motion, and then a satisfying recovery, which sells the weight and the impact of the action. More punishing moves should have a greater period of anticipation, recovery, or sometimes both. It should be the player's own fault if they don't get out of the way in time. Those that know their animation principles already know about squash and stretch. Here, I exaggerate either the horizontal or vertical proportions of a frame, and then trade the emphasis back to the other axis. While I usually aim to preserve the overall area of a frame compared to the model, there are some exceptions, like smear frames. Seasoned to taste. Squashing and stretching your character animation adds so much energy and clarity to a motion. Speaking of clarity, while having a strong silhouette is important to the appeal of any character design, I also consider it an accessibility concern. Combatants need to process information quickly to survive a fight, and sometimes there are multiple targets hurling attacks at you at once. If a player is expected to glance at an enemy and intuit how it will move in the fractions of a second thereafter, then that enemy had better have some expressive and unique shapes defining its poses. Once the sketching phase is done, it's time to move on to tying down the motion. This can be done in a number of passes depending on the complexity of the character design, the motion, or just like how you feel like doing it. For some characters, I've had 2 or 3 intermediate phases of building up the details between the sketch and the final line art. For the Beast Elemental, however, much of the detail appears in the coloring phase, so I just did the single line art pass this time. Coloring the frames starts with the flats. Here I don't worry about shadows or highlights, and I just fill the regions with the paint bucket tool. Then, with my palette on a separate layer, I step through each keyframe and paint in the details like shadows, fur patterns, etc. Like with each phase before this one, I'll loop the clip at different speeds to test the coherence of the motion, fixing any anomalies and aberrations as I go. Finally, it's time to export the sprite sheet from my animation software and import them into the game engine. Our final frame count for the Beast Elemental was 103 unique drawings. In Unity, some of the animations are very straightforward. In some cases, like the walk cycles and basic attacks, I employ the use of blend trees and the flip X property of the sprite renderer to get full 360-degree articulation. The last step is to hook the animation clips together into the animation controller state machine with transitions and send it down the pipeline. I hope you enjoyed animating the Beast Elemental with me. This was DUNJUNGUY's first quadrupedal character, as the bullywugs are bipedal and the pug slimes are, well, slimes. Make sure to wishlist DUNJUNGUY on Steam if you haven't already, and I'll see you for the next development diary in the dungeon.